What's up, family? My name is Matt Smith, aka MDS, the EQ coach, and welcome to the Baggage Claim. This is the podcast where we unload all of the things that we are carrying so that we can travel lighter through work, through family, and through faith. So check your bags, grab your courage, let's rehuman together. Now, I want to tell you guys a story about what happened to me in the last week. Earlier this week, a 60-year-old retail giant gave me a no directly to the face, straight to the face. Um, but 24 hours directly after that, a well-known franchise booked our first pilot for our Rehuman workshops. Now, I want to take you through that moment because I think there's a lot to glean from the idea of turning rejection into results, or even more importantly, rejection into resilience. And so I hopped on a call with a company that will not be named. Again, this is a 60-year-old retail giant in Southern California. And they entertained my inquiry uh, through a referral and hopped on the call. We did a 10-minute discovery call and pretty immediately established that they didn't have any value in the service that I was offering. And my immediate reaction was confusion and frustration. The thought that kept running through my mind, or the question that I kept asking myself, is why did you book the discovery call? I'd already given you the information regarding our services, the value that I believe that it was going to provide in terms of benefit for not only their team and more connection, but just addressing some of the issues that they were having in terms of certain departments siloing and communication not being congruent and that type of thing. And so, you know, it was a little discouraging. A little discouraging. If I want to talk about the emotions that I felt up front, I was pretty frustrated and enraged. But I think the most appropriate emotion was grief. I was grieving, and not necessarily grieving something that I had. I was grieving the idea that I was further along than I was, I suppose. I expected to knock this out of the park, and that simply is not how it went. So I've gone through a lot of rejection in my life. Um, I spent 9 years in Hollywood working as an actor, and I think you understand that when you go out on auditions that you're not going to book everything, right? And so you kind of face rejection back to back to back to back to back. The difference is I was rejected directly to my face this time. During an audition, you walk out of the room, you have your thoughts about how you did and whether you think you booked it or not, or whether you think the casting director was looking specifically for you or what you could offer. Um, and if you don't get a call back, you presume the answer is that you didn't book it. Obviously, the answer is that you didn't book it, but you go through that mental framework yourself. You don't have to deal with the upfront in face rejection. I had to deal with the upfront in face rejection by people who, um, as I was establishing the story for myself, people who I thought looked down on me, or people who thought I was unprepared, or whatever the case may be. Now, all of those things are just speculation. Again, those are just stories that I'm creating in my own mind, right? Nothing in the conversation necessarily suggested that they thought anything about me or my character or my preparedness or any of that. But it's so funny how we can take these little bits of information and create a whole story based on those. And more importantly, relate those to beliefs that we have that are, again, built upon stories that we feel very, very strong emotions behind, right? So, that's what I went through. Now, I'm grateful that at this point I've done enough work in therapy and through personal growth and with a lot of my faith mentors, a lot of folks in the church, to be able to unpack and process those things. And that's the nature of the work that I do now, right? Giving people an opportunity to do that live and get live feedback. And that way they can kind of bookmark the emotions as they come up in their body. They can kind of appropriate those and store those away for instances that would come up um, where they would kind of have to relive those emotions and have a healthier framework for processing, and then finding a solution and being able to communicate healthily through all that, right? So, my process, what did that look like? Well, So I get off the phone call. Um, I close my laptop. I take all of my clothes, you know what I'm saying? I had the button up on with the cardigan on over it, you know what I'm saying? Like I looked as professional and presentable as I thought I did. Took all that off and went and cried. Yep. Not ashamed to say it. Not ashamed that I was crying. You know what I mean? I cried like I hit an infield fly in the bottom of the ninth inning in the Little League World Series. If you've ever seen those kids play in the Little League World Series, they are committed. And it only takes a very, very, very small margin of error in baseball to determine whether you get the hit or whether it's going directly to the defense, right? And so that's how I cried. I cried like the stakes were the highest that they've ever been in my life. And in a lot of ways, they were. Um, this is a new venture that I'm stepping out on. I'm doing it uh, independently, right? Um, I myself have to not only establish the brand, but the value of the service, do all the prospecting, right? And I was patting myself on the back for all the work that I did. And so when we get to the point where I'm rejected, I felt like somebody was rejecting all that work. I felt like all that value was for nothing. And in the immediate moment, the portion of me that's been conditioned by instant gratification felt grief. And so I cried. You know what I mean? And let me just say this. If you have something that you're holding onto emotionally and you're not letting it go in the most natural ways that your body knows how to, then you're only creating an opportunity for your body to incorporate those things, or for your body to adopt that emotion and place it in different areas in your body that otherwise would be toxic. People who get ulcers and that type of thing, or cancers, or, there's even some diagnoses of things like pseudo dementia from repressed emotions and that type of thing. So it's kind of a dangerous thing. So let me just say this, and this is specifically for the men. If you haven't, go get the book Cry Like a Man by Jason Wilson. Um, and let that completely change your entire framework of the idea of letting tears fall. It's part of your biochemistry. As a matter of fact, each tear has different chemicals based on the emotions that you're feeling. Your tears of joy have a different chemical composition than your tears of grief, right? But anyway, let me get back to the point. So, first thing I did, I purged the emotion. I cried. But I didn't give myself, 30 minutes to cry. I gave myself 5 minutes to cry. And so I cried hard. You know what I mean? I cried to get it out. And then I journaled. Now, luckily, I don't have to write to journal. I can just pick up this thing and put it in a private archive, and that's me journaling, right? And so I took the opportunity to kind of talk myself through where I was and make some sense and have some very specific language to identify my experience, which I think is so important. Too many of us are relating experiences to very, very vague emotions or vague categories, right? We like to say that we're triggered, or we like to say that we're depressed, or those types of things. But there's a very specific difference between the emotions that you feel. As a matter of fact, being angry and being enraged are two different emotions, right? Being frustrated and being irritated are two different emotions. And so it's very, very important to be able to put an accurate label on the experience. And for me, I do that through journaling and I talk. So being able to talk through it either, through the journaling or talking through it with my therapist, that provides an incredible amount of benefit for me. Then I put some worship music on. I was very specific about making sure that I changed the atmosphere in which I was sitting in. I didn't sit in silence. I didn't put on, DMX or Eminem or something like that. You know what I mean? I didn't put on Slipknot or, I don't even know. But I didn't put anything on that was going to continue to feed the emotion that I had already identified. And already made the determination that was no longer serving me, right? So I put on things that are inspiration. For me, my faith in God, my following of Christ inspires a lot of what I do, almost everything that I do. And so putting on worship music to remind myself that these aren't things that I hold full responsibility for, reminding myself that though I may have been in a space where I was thinking that all of this was on me. There's a greater plan and purpose, even to the moments that humble me, right? And so I let my reverence for God really just envelop the environment. And from there, I was able to take the next step, which was reaching out. And this is so critical because I think the greater portion of being able to communicate, uh, or I'll say it this way, there's greater value in having a dialogue than there is in having a monologue, right? Even if you hop on chat gpt and you're just typing away your feelings and things like that, you're kind of in an echo chamber, right? You don't have anybody who can give you objective feedback and someone who has curiosity, you know what I mean, to be able to ask questions, do more digging and that type of thing. And so I reached out to a couple of brothers. I explained what I was going through, right? Talked about the situation, and there was a great level of catharsis in just being able to unload not just what I was feeling, but how I perceived the entire event and get some feedback as to whether I was crazy, you know what I'm saying? And just creating stories in my head, or whether the things that I was gleaning from the experience had value and could offer some sort of benefit to anyone else. Which, at the end of the day, if you can get outwardly focused, you'll find that that gets to be the antidote to a lot of grief and depression, and even things like overthinking, right? Erwin McManus would say that if you're overthinking, it's because you're only thinking about yourself. And so when you get into other people, you get into interactions with other people, it just automatically creates a space in which you feel value. Um, so I took myself through a process where I feel it, I name it, and I move it, right? Feeling it was the experience of crying, right? Naming it was being able to journal it out and even consult with a brother and talk about it, and then move it, right? The atmosphere was shifted as I put the worship music on. And um, even then, that got me back in the saddle, right? Now that I had a different frame of mind regarding the incident, now that I had dealt with the emotions that otherwise would have kept me from doing the next step, now that I had properly owned what I was going through, I could own the next step, right? And so directly after that, I began reaching back out and started sending more pitch decks and things like that to other companies that I thought would be interested in my pilot. And so within 24 hours, I got a response from Squeeze Massage out in Scottsdale, Arizona. If you guys don't know the company Squeeze, Squeeze pioneers the feel good revolution. So they're all about culture and they're all about teamwork. And they hold mantras like little things are big things, right? Be curious and confident. And that directly aligns with the Rehuman brand. Now, had I not gotten that first no, I don't think I would have valued the yes, and would have had less value on the work that I put into the thing in the first place, which is some of what I was questioning as I got the immediate rejection, right? So I can't stress the importance to feel it, name it, and then move it. Now, as we speak, uh, I am waiting on responses from Patagonia, Netflix, and Blizzard Activision to see if they would like to take advantage of a Rehuman pilot. And of course, it's going to be complimentary and things. But I wouldn't have moved into that action had I not first dealt with the experience that created resentment around the last action that I took. Now, we're going to go ahead and drop some scripture on this really quickly. And I'm going to take everybody over to James. So these are pretty popular. But anyway, James 1, 2, and 4 says, My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. If I hadn't had the trial, I wouldn't develop the patience. If I didn't have the patience, I wouldn't be able to apply resilience. If I wouldn't have applied any resilience, I wouldn't have gotten any results. And I think so often, too many times, we want to um, have the result without the process, and forget that the process is producing not only the character but also the skill to um, carry on regardless of what we're doing or regardless of what our goals are. And so honestly, that's what Rehuman is all about, right? Being able to go through the process of trial. Um, Even when we're talking about interpersonal relationships or things that are intimate in nature or close to the heart, being able to take those things and count those trials as joy, having an amount of respect and an amount of appreciation for the trial and what the trial produces. That way, we can walk in more patience and we can address things from a position of healing rather than hurt, right? Now, that speaks to what we talk about all the time in house, right? Our in house acronym is we do it for the culture, right? And so the C stands for courage. Uh, if you're not applying courage, you're just going to stay in the same space. It's hard to activate faith without courage. Courage is the first step that you take to affirm the belief that you have that you can do it, right? And courage doesn't mean that you succeed. Courage just means that you take that first step. Unity. Unity is what the U stands for. We do everything together in one mind, on one accord, as we're all working toward one goal. Um, and we want to make sure that we can hash out the things that would otherwise keep us separated so that we can get back to healthy unity and harmony. Love. Let love be the inspiration behind everything that you do. The L in culture is love. And I can't think of a better um, I can't think of a better core value to inspire anything that anybody would put their effort into. The universe itself, all of humanity was saved because of love, and so that's not something that we take lightly. We love and we love hard and we love completely. Um, it says in the word that perfect love drives out all fear, and so if you can walk into a workspace where you know that love is abundant, you feel like the possibilities are endless because there's no fear holding you back from anything. Truth. Some people would say authenticity or integrity, but truth. Truth is so important. The consistency between your words and your actions is critical. Being transparent and allowing people to see you inspires trust. And so, truth cannot be understated. Truth, authenticity, integrity, all of those things are critical in our culture. Understanding is the second U, right? Humility, empathy, compassion, that all lends to understanding. We want to be able to relate to one another. That's how we create unity. You have to understand something in order to subscribe and be unified underneath it. And so unity and understanding kind of go hand in hand. However, we got to separate the two, if nothing else, just for the acronym. Resilience. We just talked about the reward of resilience. On the other side of rejection, even resilience moves you forward. Resilience is the soil that breeds confidence, in my opinion. And so, being able to face trials and continue moving forward through the trials, reminding yourself of the truth is critical, in my opinion. And then E stands for excellence. We're real people, um, caring for people, and having the resource to bring out the highest standard. You know, excellence is not something that we just talk about. It's not something that you just do in the workplace. Be excellent in what is good. Be innocent of evil, and the God of peace will soon crush Satan underneath your feet. Right? That's what Romans uh, says that in Romans somewhere. I don't have the address. Culture is our internal mantra. And so we live by that. I'm gonna give you guys an emotional intelligence or an EQ tool for the week. And this week it's just box breathing. Now, some of you know that I've been in manual therapy, massage, and body work for 15 years now. Um, Recently retired. But one of the things that I would always communicate before a session starts was the value of a certain breathing pattern to allow for the body to release, right? And so anytime that I'm feeling stressed, I implore what's called box breathing, right? And some of you have heard of this. You inhale for 4, you hold for 4, and then you exhale for 4, and that will almost literally reset your entire central nervous system. You'll be able to find your heart rate slowing down. You'll be able to focus a little bit better. Anxiety and things like that kind of leave the body as you can regulate your breath. It's the most natural thing that you can do. And again, we get away from things like breathing and crying and start doing things that are not as constructive. Um, and so, not only did I take the time to take a breath, but also I needed to get to the bottom of the emotion, right? And so, why do I have such a huge problem with rejection? Well, it's not the rejection itself, because I just talked about being an actor and having been rejected over and over and over again. But something about being rejected to my face uh, really did something. And so I had to ask the question, uh, who was I receiving that from? Right? When that woman rejected me, and not even rejected me, rejected the opportunity for me to do a complimentary pilot for them, their loss. But uh, who did I receive that rejection from first that created the emotion, that created the belief that I wasn't good enough or that all the work that I was doing was for naught? And I can go back in my history and probably get to my very, very early adolescence and the first time that I was rejected. And that rejection made me feel, or not made me feel, I chose to believe from that point that I had less value because I was rejected by one person who couldn't see my value. Um, and that continued to build a story in my head over time as I didn't surround myself with people who would directly affirm my value. And I've I've gone through my own process of starting with coping mechanisms and then getting into applying real tools, uh, not just to cope but to process and to move through. Right. Um, I smoked a lot of weed in my early adulthood. As a matter of fact, from like 19, even up until my mid 30s, late 30s, uh, there were times where I was smoking breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and really just trying to escape more than anything. Um, and that, of course, you know, if you've been an avid weed smoker, you know that it kills ambition. Um, Obviously, inhaling smoke in any kind of way is very, very damaging to the body. You start to find that what seems harmless up front really does have long residual effect. Particularly for me, my memory. My memory I used to be sharp as a tack. And now, I walk into a room and I'm like, what was I doing? And so, uh, but replacing that habit, the habit of smoking, with presence, um, and even finding different means of not just comfort, but looking for peace, that shifts the behavior with a different goal in mind and a different mindset to frame the value of pursuit of that goal. We can apply a different behavior based on that value. So the value was no longer avoiding or being numb or just letting the time pass so that I could get to the next moment that would potentially be more enjoyable. The value is seeking peace. And we can understand that peace doesn't come without war, right? If peace is not already laid as the foundation um, for community, then you're going to have to war with something to return to peace. And so I had to fight for my mind. I had to fight for my mind. I had to fight for my heart in order to get back to peace. I had to go back and I had to address a lot of hurts that I felt victimized by when I was younger. I even had to confront uh some of the people who perpetrated some hurt in my life. Um, and I'm grateful that through the process of healing, I've been able to do that in love rather than doing that from um, a place of resentment or even a place of pride. Um, really just sincerely being in a place where I can forgive after doing the work to process how I was feeling and what I received from any of those experiences that hurt. And so going from smoking to breathing, um, meditating, journaling, um, creating a different atmosphere, and then, you know, putting it on socials. That to me is a much more constructive system for processing and going through things than just, chiefing a J or chiefing a blunt or whatever the case may be, and and just forgetting about any of it, because you don't ever really forget. It just buries itself deep in your subconscious. And like we started out saying, those things manifest in the body in different weird, nasty ways. So I hope that resonates with you guys, man. I hope there's a lot of value that you took from this conversation. Listen, if you or your team are interested in the complimentary Rehuman workshop pilot, you can send me a DM. Rehuman is basically a live emotional intelligence gem where people are dropped into short scenario based stories where they get the opportunity to act those things out and receive real feedback about the emotions that come up, the way that they're being perceived or received, and then they get the opportunity to leave with practical tools that same day as to how you can go and readdress those situations that brought those types of emotions up. So if that sounds like something that you or your team want to take advantage of and you want a complimentary pilot, go ahead and send me a DM. And we're going to go ahead and close out with a really, really brief prayer. Um, Lord, we're grateful for today. Please teach us how to travel lighter and what it means to literally lay these things down at your feet and cast our cares on you. We love you and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Listen, y'all be good. Thank you again for joining me for the baggage claim. I'll catch you guys next week, and be love.